Okay, we're finally live. Sorry for anybody that might have been turning in or tuning in. Um, I don't know how to work most of this, so finally got Shannon on board with me, and welcome to hang out with me.
Yeah.
Now, when I first started trying to become an author and getting into the whole blogging thing, honestly, you were probably the one author I looked up to because I don't know, you're one of the first that I found, first of all, and then after that, just everything that you put out there was always just really insightful, and I could follow along with it. And then I got into your books, and it you could grow more as a person when I got to know you. Now, when did you start your whole blogging experience?
I started blogging in September of 2012, which was 7 years, 5 years after my first novel came out. But my first novel was off the market. I wanted to get back into publishing, but I didn't know how to because the whole market had changed so much. Because when my first book came out, there wasn't Kindle, there wasn't ebooks. So my first book came to me via semi-truck, and I had 500 paperbacks. So when I got back into the industry, and it was all new. Everything was new. And so I actually spoke to a publishing consultant, and she got me into WordPress and was like, you need to get a blog. You'll connect with people. You can just talk about books. And I was like, that sounds awesome. I get to talk about books with people who like to talk about books. And so I started my blog, and I started with book reviews, even music reviews, some movie reviews, and went from there. It's kind of crazy to see how much it's developed because you can still go back to September of 2012 and see these original things where I have no pictures and no links, and then you go now and every post is pictures and links and writing tips or videos, and so it was a learning process.
Now, your first book you actually published when well, I can't remember now. Was it when you were 16?
Yes, I was 16.
Now, when I was 16, that was nothing that I was thinking about. So what actually made you say, "Hey, I want to write a book," and then not only that, but say, "Hey, I want to publish this book."
Well, a lot of that came from my mom suddenly dying. She was a writer, I was a writer, we wrote together, and then when she died, I think I put all my energy and focus into that. I knew that's what I wanted to do, but I also knew I didn't have to wait. Like everyone wants to tell you when you get older and you have like extra time and you're retired, then you can write. And I'm like, why can't I write now? And so I started. And it took me a long time. The first book took a really long time because I think every beginning writer can understand you don't know what you're doing. You think you do, and then you quickly realize you don't. And so there was a lot of drafts that I had to do. And the publication process is actually a funny story. My father got remarried, and he got divorced, and he actually met the publisher in a divorce group. And so then she met with me. So funny story, things like that happen. And it was like stars aligned. It was so strange and bizarre. And I can't explain it. And we got to a meeting and we spoke about my book and what my goals were, and she really appreciated me and I appreciated her work, and we started working together, and within a few years it was published.
Wow. And with like what you were saying as far as first time publishing, I think a lot of people that might be tuning into this are going to be in that same category of I want to publish a book or I am just publishing my first book. When you started with that one, I think you're probably in a completely different class of people than most people today because, well, you were a teenager at the time. So would you say that when you published your series, that do you consider that kind of your first book, or you just always go back to that one when you were a teenager?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think it depends on, I feel like, and this might be strange, but I feel like every new publication feels like the first publication. Like every experience is so different that my first book does feel like my first book, but the trilogy was so different that it felt like a whole new experience, a whole new first book. And to me, and maybe it was because I went from an era where they were printing 500 books at once to ebooks, that felt so different, and had 7 years had passed between my first and my second book being published. But now I look at the remake of Minutes Before Sunset from the first copy to this copy, and it feels like a first publication because the cover is so different and my team is so different, and both teams are great, but it feels so different that it feels like the first time.
Yeah. And when you changed to a different publisher, did you feel like you could, I mean, did you actually try and like redo anything off of that book? Because I know if I went back, or if I do go back and redo my first book, there's a lot of different things I'd like to incorporate or pave over or kind of redo. Did you do anything like that?
Not in content-wise. The trilogy will basically be the same content, but we are running it through a whole new editing process, so there probably will be some language changes that I'm really looking forward to. It's going to have a really beautiful interior I've already seen, and of course the new covers. But I am hoping to redo November Snow, which was the very first book I did when I was 16, and that is changing dramatically because of course, wrote it very young, and I understand that it's still out there, but I would like it to be more professional, and I would like it to have better language for my readers. So I am working on redoing that as a new experience in a new book.
Now, as far as first-time author things go, when you started, trying to think how to phrase it, did you think you know what you were doing? I mean, did you feel confident when you put it out there?
No, I don't think I ever do. I think it's a constant learning process. I try to keep my mind open. I just want to meet new authors I can learn from, readers I can learn from, bloggers I can learn from. I think you can always learn, and this industry is changing so much that you have to be willing to learn. Because one moment Facebook will let you reach people and the next it won't. So you have to figure out how to adjust. And so I don't think there is a level of I know what I'm doing. I think there's a level of confidence in that you believe in yourself, that you're going to keep trying.
Now, are you at a point where you feel pretty confident in what you're doing?
I think so. I think I feel confident in the sense that I've accepted that I'm going to do this no matter what. Whether people are giving me a hard time or trying to discourage me or bad review, like, I love this and I'm going to keep writing no matter what, and I'm going to keep connecting with readers. So I think that's where confidence stems from, is accepting that your love for writing is what's pushing you forward.
Now, thinking about the bad review comment in there, do you remember your first one? Do you remember the first person that ever just said, it's crap, it's total crap, what are you doing?
Oh, excuse the curse word, but yes, the worst thing I was ever told was that I was the bastardization of the English language. And I was told that in high school when November Snow came out. So I got a quick lesson in bad reviews. But I think there's some fun in them. Like you get to laugh at yourself, and you get to learn, and you get to accept that, no one's gonna like everything. So it's a good thing, I think, as long as you get a critical review that actually points out, like, I don't really like paranormal romance, but I'm reviewing this anyway. I think that's great, because now you're letting other people know if you don't like this or you do like this, you might like this, and that's awesome.
Yeah, I wasn't quite as big-hearted when I got my first bad review. I think I just wrote the name down and went, I'm going to look for you later. It wasn't really like a terrible review. It was more of they were making more fun of the readers, I think.
Oh, that's, yeah.
Categorizing every reader that I have as, only a 12-year-old girl is going to like this type of book. And I think, no, I have people from 12 to like 60 that are enjoying it, so you're kind of insulting a lot of people. I think that's where I took it to heart. But now, for reviews, do you like? For me, I go on to Goodreads and Amazon pretty much every day and just kind of see if there's anything new or anything added. Do you do the same thing, or you just kind of let it exist out in the internet world and don't bother?
Well, for me as a reader, I definitely go on to Goodreads and Amazon, and I'm searching for books I want to read, and I review books on Goodreads, I think, more than anywhere else. But I try to stay away from constantly looking at how many reviews I'm getting or stars, but I do make it a point to record statistics every 1st of the month and 15th of the month. And I do that all year round, and that's not because I'm like, oh, I have 50 reviews, now I'm awesome. No, it's because I'm trying to track what I'm doing as an author and if I'm successful at reaching my readers and doing the best I can and trying to just see a steady growth, even if it's very small.
And thinking of reviews and stuff like that, when you first started, did you see a lot of, or I guess I saw a lot of people that were actually just coming and saying, hey, will you take a look at this book? And I started doing that, and then I kind of realized I'm a little bit too picky on things. Did you get bombarded with people that wanted you to read their book?
Yeah, I think that happens in today's industry is you get a lot of people that want you to do certain things, and even if you're polite, you can sometimes get attacked for that. But I think as long as you strive to be like the best person you can be at handling situations where you're just trying to explain like, I would really like to read your book, but I don't have time right now, or your book doesn't sound like it's for me, but I wish you the best of luck. As authors, we all need to be more accepting of each other's time and goals and support.
And when you wrote your second book, like when I am trying to like rationalize this or categorize this for myself.
Mm-hmm.
When you did your second book, did you feel like somehow it was lessened as far as like you lost a whole bunch of people that looked like they read your first book?
Like if I lost readers from the first book to the second book?
Like, did you see a drastic change from the amount of people that took to your first book in your series, and then to
Okay.
the second one, then it just suddenly started dwindling? Did you feel that, or were you pretty consistent?
I think it's been actually growing. Like the more books you release, the more readers you can connect with. I think the hardest part, though, sometimes is when you release I don't want to say too many books. You can never release too many books. But the more books you release, the more you're juggling, so to speak. The more you're like, okay, I want to talk about the Timely Death trilogy with these readers. But when I had Take Me Tomorrow come out, too, I didn't know how to manage a trilogy, a paranormal romance, and a young adult dystopian novel. They were different genres, they were different readers. Like not all of them wanted to read my new work, and some of them only wanted to read that work. And so you're trying to find readers for both and trying to keep them all straight and trying not to feel guilty when you mess up.
And with the when you changed genre, I mean, it wasn't a drastic change by the.
No.
Because I read your first one in the Timely Death trilogy. I haven't got to the second one, and then I'm halfway through Take Me Tomorrow.
Mhm.
I mean, I can still kind of feel the similar type of characteristics as far as the reader voice.
Mhm.
I mean, that wasn't a big change for me personally. Do you find that some people just want the romance element in there? That's why they go to Family Death trilogy, or
I think there's a lot of elements at play. I think the drug topic was too much for some people with the Take Me Tomorrow book, which is completely understandable. And I think the other book, the paranormal romance, is, even though they're both young adult, arguably, I think some people prefer, vampires and werewolves to real people. So I thought that the biggest difference, the biggest thing readers were like, I liked this book and not this book. They liked paranormal. They wanted creatures. They wanted what goes bump in the night. And Take Me Tomorrow's humans. There was no one with powers, or, I mean, I guess you could argue the drug let you see the future, but even that was arguable. So I think that was the biggest difference, is some people want the fantasy and some people want real people. So that would be my biggest guess from what I saw.
and thinking on that, I always see two different classifications in books as far as supernatural and paranormal. Do you find that there's a vast difference, or do you put a difference in there for that?
I don't think so. It's hard for me to see differences in genre, which I know is so not allowed to be said, but my whole thing is I like pretending this all exists in one universe. Think of like how all the Marvel comic books link together. I like to think that a paranormal universe can exist with a dystopian one, or you can have aliens, science fiction, and fantasy, like vampires. Why not? I think that's great. Combine things, change things, challenge things. So no, I don't think I would see a difference in supernatural and paranormal.
For me, I always, when I try to classify it in my own head, but when I do, I always think supernatural is more of the monsters and fun magic type stuff. Although magic starts to get into the whole fantasy realm, and then paranormal, I always think of just ghosts. That's all. I lump all ghost things into paranormal. That's where they exist for me.
Hmm.
Um, for is there a favorite genre you like to write in, or is it just kind of whatever topic comes to your head? How do you write? How's that?
I think I like writing in young adult and new adult the most, but other than that, I don't think I have like a favorite. Like I don't lean towards paranormal or dystopian, but young adult is probably my favorite genre to write in, and I also really like writing poetry.
Yeah, and I've seen through your YouTube channel that you read some of your poems in there. I think they're great. Um, Personally, as far as all poetry goes, I get lost in it, and I think that's just because of my attention span. But I think people who can actually work those words in the way that like you do, it's one of those gifts. It's kind of like playing a guitar. Like I don't know how you do it, but I mean, good job.
Yeah, I started studying poetry in college. I never thought I would write poems, but we had to take like three different types of writing courses to get a writing degree. And I knew I wanted to study fiction. And the funniest part was I took fiction and I didn't like the fiction courses because they only wanted to focus on literary fiction. And while I liked that, I thought that that was very limiting. And so I decided to go take poetry and screenwriting and playwriting and discover other things that I wasn't familiar with rather than studying something I was very familiar with. And I ended up taking like 4 poetry courses and loving it, just falling in love with it. It was great.
Okay, I'll try and get a little bit off topic just because I know we're saturating it with literary talk. What
Yeah.
do you outside of like? I'm assuming you don't wake up, have a cup of coffee, and write blog all throughout your day. I'm sure you have something else that you like doing. I hope.
Yeah, I have lots of things I like doing, but I do, when I wake up in the morning, I do start with a cup of coffee. That's something I have to start with. And I edit full time. I'm a social media marketer full time. I manage authors, book reviews, things like that. So I actually really enjoy that. And then I write, but I definitely love traveling. I love old 1950s movies, Humphrey Bogart, which is where I got my cat's name, Bogart. I love his films. I love movies. I'm not a TV person, but I love movies.
What's your favorite kind of, or do you have a favorite movie beside? I'm guessing like Humphrey Bogart. Other
Casablanca.
movie? Yeah,
Other
that's
than
first
that,
given. But is
oh,
there a movie that you go to, or I guess I could put that in the last category of a couple decades, but
um,
it's
well,
not.
I go to the theater a lot. I like to discover movies that probably aren't mainstream. I'm trying to remember the title of the one I just watched on Netflix, but I want to say it was Live Now, and it was kind of about like a nuclear bomb went off over in Europe and Americans over there, and she has to go through the changes when they go through the emergency systems. And that was really interesting. It had that actress from the Grand Budapest Hotel, and I just watched that last night too. So that's a great movie. So I think my movie range is very just like my novel ranges. I love reading all different kinds of genres, so I like watching all different kinds of genres.
Is there a movie that you have out there that you could quote, like from start to
Whoa.
finish?
Oh, Casablanca for sure. I could definitely quote that movie. Probably things like Aladdin too. I love Aladdin. It's a good one.
Now me, for whatever reason, I loved the movie Clue. I don't know how many people have actually seen it out there. It's based off of the Parker Brothers board game. Has a bunch of older comedians in it, like Tim Curry and Christopher Lloyd and Madeline Kahn or Kane, however you pronounce it. But I could literally, it could be playing in the background. I could do dialogue with it from start to finish. And I got my daughter hooked on it, and now she's trying to like match me. She's trying to see if she can watch it as many times as I have, which is pretty impossible. But she tries to follow along all the dialogue now. She'll quote it. She'll send me texts. It's awesome.
I'll have to see that movie because that's coincidentally my favorite board game.
And you haven't seen.
And I haven't seen the movie, but that is my favorite board game.
I swear to God, it's on Netflix. I'm just even gonna find right now while you're talking if
I'll
it
have to look for it. I think
now.
that's my favorite board game because when I was little, we moved around a lot, so I really had to play games by myself. I always joke that I set Furbies up around like the Monopoly board and I'd play against myself. But Clue, you can't do that. So I think that's why it was my favorite game. I had to find somebody.
There has to be some way to win this. Now, you have a brother though, right?
I do. I have an older brother.
And he just didn't want to play with you though.
I think he grew out of that eventually. He likes torturing me, that's for sure, which is probably where some of my cynical humor came from at some point.
Yeah. Well, I'm a big fan of cynical humor, and I grew up with a sister who's 8 years older. So by the time I got to any sort of talking age, I was completely annoying to her. So, in a sense, in that way, I kind of grew up kind of only child syndrome, even though my
Hmm.
sister was there, but she was out by the time I got to, age 10. She was in college. So I also had a lot of the similar play to downstairs with toys type of thing.
Hmm.
Yeah, sad, sad days. But um, I lost train of thought.
I think those were the first days I started creating characters. I don't think I had imaginary friends. I had characters. That's what I was doing.
That's a good point. Like, here's a good spotlight question. What made you fall in love with writing?
Oh, that is so difficult to answer. It's like what makes you fall in love with coffee? You love it. Like you just connect with it, you try it, and it's everything. You disappear into it, you become it. It teaches you things, you learn with it, and it's even though it's just you. And I feel like that's what writing was to me. I tried it and that was it. It was love.
Well, I think that's a pretty good definition of it then. Was there a certain age that you found that, I mean, obviously when I fell in love with coffee, I was a teenager, but like I fell in love with writing, I think, far before that. Was there a time frame that worked for you?
Oh, right. I've been writing my whole life. Like I was talking about my mom earlier. And I actually have a blog post coming up about this on April 4th, is I had nightmares and night terrors, which are actually different things as a kid, and I couldn't understand them. Night terrors, you don't know that you're dreaming for those who don't know, and sometimes you have like hallucinations or you can't tell the difference between reality and fiction. And so that was my problem when I was a kid, and that still happens, and most of my novels are actually based on those. And I didn't, of course, as a child, understand it. So my mom taught me to make up stories to cope with them. And so I remember from a very young age telling stories to stuffed animals and before I could write, and then writing when I knew how to write. And I think the first time I really wrote a story was in elementary school. We were writing a leprechaun themed story for St. Patrick's Day, and my teacher had to make me stop. I had like 27 pages stapled back and forth, and she was like, Shannon, you're done. Like, that's enough. You got an A, move on. And I didn't want to move on. I was like, the story is not done yet. So I was missing recess so I could write about leprechauns that season.
That's funny. I think my first one, I used to watch a lot of action movies growing up because the 80s were a decade of whatever action movies out there is awesome. And I think I watched like all three Die Hards once, like back to back to back, and then just like I gotta do something. So I wrote some sort of parody of it, not parody, but a related story with all my friends were involved, and they were all terrorists, and it was completely ridiculous. And apparently, my friend who is now living somewhere else, doing his own life, and he said, "I came across that story of yours from sixth grade." I went,
Oh,
"Oh
wow.
my god." I thought it was gone. I didn't know it existed. Do you think that you still have things like that out there? Like, did you have a pack rat syndrome where, like, my mom has boxes and
Yes.
boxes of stuff where it's just like, really, you saved this. This is everything that I've ever had from age kindergarten through. She just hands it over some days. God, just throw it away.
Yeah, my mom actually left these big boxes full of, various childhood art projects. And we just recently went through them. My brother got married last summer, so we opened them for the first time, and we were going through them. And we just found stacks and stacks of these little stapled books I wrote, and they were mainly about dogs because I grew up with big dogs. And so I had this one about my dogs, Milo, Max, and Shadow, at like a dog party, and they were playing musical bone chairs. So, and I had drew all these bones, and it was really creepy. There was this one picture of a house drawn in like all black with like a red creature on the side. And it was like, I see red. And I was like, this is something you see in a horror movie. Like when a little kid draws something and you're like, we're all going to die at midnight because we didn't pass along this email. Like that's what it was like. And it was pretty funny. We were all in tears. We were laughing so hard. I was like, I was writing dark fiction even back then. So...
That's fun. Now, thinking of that, if you were in one of those scenarios now where you came across this creepy ass picture, what would you do?
I don't know. Well, I guess I did. It was by me, and I started laughing, which is funny because it's kind of like you watch those horror movies and someone hears something in the house and then they go towards it, and you're like, why would you do that? I do that all the time. I hear a noise and I'm like, what was that? And I walked straight towards it. So I probably would be that person that didn't take the omen like I should and leave.
For me, it's completely opposite. I hear a scary noise. I'm not calling out, hello, is anybody there? I'm just going to turn around and I'm going to get the hell out. Starbucks for a while.
It's funny how we all react differently. That's what sets characters apart and makes stories interesting.
Yeah. Now, when you write certain characters, when they get a little bit darker, is that kind of an outlet that you can kind of tap into? Because I know when I do, it's just like, yep, any weird, bad, crazy thoughts that I've ever had, I'm just gonna push onto this character so it doesn't look like I'm crazy.
I think it is an outlet. I think writing itself is an outlet. So naturally, those things are going to happen. At the same time, though, I think I lose myself, so it's difficult for me to say whether it's me that came up. It's just strange. It's like with a very disconnecting feeling that I can't say I came up with that. I've never been confident enough in that to be like, I came up with that story. Like I said, they all come from dreams. So a lot of the times my inspiration doesn't feel like I was sitting there and I came up with this story. I feel like I was given it and in this weird dream world, I guess. So I think, yes, it's an outlet, but to me it's also, I think, I don't know, I guess a connection, sort of, so to speak.
Now, have you ever written something down and just go, I can't publish it, I can't put that out there, I don't know where that came from, but it's got to go in a drawer somewhere?
Definitely, definitely. I know that the last book of the Timely Death trilogy actually went through a huge editing process because the original manuscript, I did not feel comfortable with some of the scenes. And if you've ever read the last book, then you're probably going, I can't imagine what could be worse than what's in the first few chapters of that book because the books progressively get darker. But there's just certain topics that I have yet to still feel comfortable with putting them in fiction because I don't want to treat certain topics as entertainment, and not that you can't put certain topics in it and not have it just be for entertainment, but me personally, I have to cut certain things out.
Yeah, I can understand that. When you're going through a trilogy process like that, do you find that the further on you go, the more you have to try and push yourself to make it a little bit, I don't know, darker or more entertaining or more something?
I don't think I have to push myself, but I do feel sometimes that authors are under pressure to always have that third book be the best book. Or, you know, the first book needs to be like entertaining and get you into the series, but the second one better be better than the first, and the third one better be better than the first and the second combined. And it's kind of difficult because it's like you wrote the first book and now you have to overcome yourself. It's almost like a shadow game where you have to fight your shadow in a video game. Like, that's how it feels. They're like, how am I supposed to beat myself? Yes. And so I think there's a little bit of that. Like, I don't feel like I force myself or push myself to do it necessarily. I think it happens naturally, but I think there's a lot of expectation and nervousness that you won't meet that expectation.
Yeah, and when you said that your inspirations, they come from dreams that you've had, Um, do you get to a point where you have to turn on your own, creative switch, I guess? Like you might have had the idea for one thing, but now you're like, okay, I gotta incorporate this, or there's this idea that I just had about it. How do I put that in there?
Definitely, definitely. When I have a dream and I base a novel off it, I normally only have one or two. And so you're talking one scene or two scenes at most. You're not talking all 24 characters and all, backdrops and all their relationships. That stuff comes over time while writing and carefully considering certain things like, what's this person going to look like? If I never saw them in a dream, I need to figure that out. I've had certain situations where characters don't, most of the time characters open up to me slowly, but other times characters can fight you. And so you're like, what are you trying to say to me? And then you're like, no, I'm not going to say anything to you. And 500 pages later, they finally expose who they are, and now you have to go back and make sure the rest of the novel makes sense. I've had a character change ages on me at the end of the book. And I was like, okay, I could have known that on page one, but that happens.
Helpful, yeah.
Mhm.
Um, Now, I don't know if it's still out there, but I remember seeing on your blog at one point in time, there was this picture of this lady with swords and swinging them around, and that I realized that picture was you. Is that right?
That was me. That was definitely me.
Do you have like a sword collection that just kind of hangs over the mantle?
Kind of. That's the goal. That's the goal. That's the dream, isn't it? Nice office with some swords on the
Who doesn't want
wall.
swords on the wall? Come on.
That is something I want.
I got all this space back here where I can put some sword.
I guess I have some space back here too. But that was a machete I got for my 17th birthday. And yeah, yes, it was a birthday present. So.
Is there a lot of I mean, is there that much overgrowth down in Kansas where a machete is?
We did take a pumpkin to it once. It was fun. We threw the pumpkin up in the air, at the end of Halloween, and it cut right through. It was pretty fun. Dangerous, probably, but.
See, now that's all I really want to try doing.
It does. It goes right. It was beautiful. I wanted one of those slow-mo cameras, but I don't think we had one of those back then.
No. Now do you just kind of like, I don't know how to put it. Do you just like play around outside with your machete? Or
I haven't pulled that machete out in a long time, but I have a knife collection, and actually the beginning of Take Me Tomorrow, for those who don't know, is Sophia running through a forest with her throwing knives and practicing them, and her dogs like barking and cheering her on, and they're running through the forest, and everybody wants to be like, oh, that was inspired by the Hunger Games, and that just made me giggle because it was actually inspired off my real life. And it had nothing to do with the Hunger Games. That's what I was doing for entertainment in Kansas. We lived on a bunch of acres. I had a knife collection. I was 16. What are you going to do? So my dog Shadow and I used to do that. Yeah.
I'll have to say I'm kind of in the same boat. Maybe it's just an author thing. Maybe we just like knives and weapons and whatever. I picked up this real inexpensive set. It came with like an instruction manual and everything of how you can throw them. And first time I tried throwing it, it stuck in the target, except it stuck with the hilt into the target, and the pointy end was spacing me. I just went, well, that sucked.
I guess you hit the target.
Yeah, I'm like, that's weighted bad. I just have bad knives. I'm not a bad thrower. I think I remember also being, I don't know, probably 10, and in my backyard we used to have this large maple tree, and my parents were at work or doing one of a million various things, and so I'd be home alone, and it was just like, if they're watching this now, I'm really sorry, but they had to have known. I'm just out there, and I'd pick up whatever's sharp in my dad's garage, and I'd just go out and I'd chuck it at the tree. When it's stuck in there, I'd be like, yes.
I think that's just what you have to do. It's instinctual. You're like, I need to try this, and then I'm gonna put it in a book. So.
Yeah, this is whole character building stuff. Hopefully they realize that now. I think I tried saw blades and I tried arrows and just basically whatever I could find. And I remember one time I was so scared because I shot an arrow at a tree. I mean, I was only like 10 feet away, but it hit the side and it ricocheted and it went into somebody's backyard. I just went, oh my God, I hope nobody's back there. Luckily, they weren't.
Yeah, that's a good thing. I have a couple of stories like that. Yeah, no, my brother, I was raised by my brother and my father pretty much, and they were both hunters. So there was a lot of weaponry going around the house from a young age. So there's always shenanigans going on. Not shenanigans I'm proud of necessarily, but they sure make for some good stories.
They really do, especially later on when it went safely in the past, I think.
Yes.
I think I've given my mom a slight heart attack with some of the things I've said, oh no, that was me.
Hmm. And it's just funny when you put something like that in an actual story, like a novel, and people automatically assume like, oh, that can't happen. I think that was the funniest part of seeing the Hunger Games comparison for me is they automatically assume like only that could happen in like a dystopian future in the forest where young girls are with weapons in the forest. And I was like, that's pretty humorous because I do think a lot of things happen in real life, but when you put it in fiction, it has to be in this magical world. It can't possibly have actually happened in real life.
No, not at all. Who needs that?
Hmm.
Do you find that a lot of the bigger selling books like Hunger Games and Divergent series and things like that, those might be affecting too many readers toward like, your book or any book in the whole YA category now?
I think that happens often, but at the same time, I don't judge anybody for it because what are you going to do? You're going to compare it to what other people are most likely going to recognize. And so I think it's actually helpful in many ways for people to say, hey, I read this book. It's like the Hunger Games in this way, but it's not like the Hunger Games in this way. I think that's helpful because it's something most people can recognize and decide based on that comparison whether they might like it or not too. And I think it's pretty cool to be compared to the best-selling thing out there. But at the same time, I think it also sets up some negative expectations. Like I have a dictator, for instance, in Take Me Tomorrow, Weston Phelps, and everyone kept comparing him to President Snow and that he wasn't as round. That was never my intention. He was never supposed to be a major character, not ever. But I think that's when it gets destructive, when people want it to be the same book instead of just comparing it.
Have you ever had to get to a point where you actually went back and realized like, oh, that's really a lot like this thing that's really popular. Maybe I have to redo it?
I don't think so. I don't think I've gotten to that point. I don't think I've ever written something that was so similar to something else. But at the same time, I don't think it's really possible to be 100% unique because everybody's written about something somewhere, especially now that we have such an open and a wide-ranged publishing industry, which is great. But yeah, I don't think it's possible to like come up with this brand new idea no one's ever thought of before. It's the way you express it and develop that idea and the way you have different characters and different scenarios. I think that's where you get unique.
Now, kind of touching a little bit on that is, I mean, nowadays it's kind of the age of the indie author, it seems like, maybe because there's so many more of them than actually a traditional published author. I mean, granted, you're in a publishing house now, but I think they always think of the whole big five publishers and things like that. So things like writing query letters just to get an agent to get your book to a publisher, do you feel like those things are kind of dying out?
I do feel like literary agents are dying out. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that. But even the big five are starting to let anybody apply to them, or the big five are going after indie authors when their books start selling exorbitantly and offering them a deal. So I do think in the next few years you will probably see the literary agent dwindle a lot more than it already has. I don't think traditional publishing or indie publishing or self-publishing is going to go away anytime soon, but I do hope things change to be more open, to allow like more indie books to get into stores, for instance. But I don't think any of those three are just going to melt away. I think they're going to change.
Meld?
Like melt away, like disappear.
Oh yeah, I thought they meant like combine with something else though.
Oh, maybe they'll change and combine in some way, but
Yeah.
I don't think that the big five are going to go away necessarily. I do think that they'll change. They're going to have to change. But I don't know how those changes will happen. I don't think anyone does.
Do you feel like the market kind of gets inundated now with all the indie authors? 'Cause before I released, which was a lot more recent than you, I had to actually like Google the name of my book, and then I had to Google topics of the book just to make sure that like I'm not overlapping from 4 different categories, am I?
Oh, like taking someone else's title or?
Or just basically like finding out that the thing that you just wrote, somebody else wrote pretty much exactly.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. I don't feel like I've had to do that, but I know I've done that. Like I've Googled, has this, did someone write a book about a clairvoyant drug in a dystopian society? At the same time, I'm not sure if Google could even pop up with something. It might just pop up with, I don't know, some movie that just came out about drugs or drug trafficking articles. So it's kind of difficult because there are so many novels and so many authors to try to figure out something like that.
Have you come across some? I know I have. I'll just admit that I've come across some books that have like really high ratings, and I'm like, oh, awesome! I'm gonna try this one out, and I read it, and I go, why do people like it? I don't.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that comes down to not everyone's going to like everything. I've read some books that had some great ratings or people really, really wanted to read it or it was the book of the week and I was like, oh, I'm going to try this and I can't get past a couple of pages. I was that way with Divergent. It's not badly written. It's not a bad story. It just wasn't for me. I had to put it down. I couldn't get through it. But I don't ever tell people not to read it or anything like that. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah, I think it was the same way when my wife picked up the Twilight series and years ago when Twilight was actually in the theaters, and I watched the first movie and I went, it was all right. I guess I'll read the book and see what it's all about. I couldn't get halfway through the book and just went, it's regurgitating the same thing kind of over and over again. So for me, it was just kind of like, I'll just watch the movie.
Mhm.
But what I've seen a trend in the last, I don't know, maybe decade, that more and more people are trying to write the strong female characters. Have you seen more of that?
I have, and I could say so much about this topic. I really could, because I almost think it's sad that we even have to be like, oh, we need strong female characters. We should just have characters that are honest to themselves, that are people. We don't need to focus on if they're female or male or not. And just because you put a weapon in their hand doesn't make them strong. It may make them interesting or they might be able to kill somebody, but that doesn't mean they're strong-minded or strong-willed or even that they wanted to do something. I think the biggest argument people like to talk about is Katniss, like going back to the Hunger Games. Was she strong or not? It's like, yes, she kills a whole bunch of people, but she was forced to do it. And by the end of the book, she's arguably insane. So it depends on what book you're talking about. But I think that's such a complex issue, and I wish people would just try to write characters like they were real people and be honest to them, and they can be weak, and they can be strong, and they can just be themselves. And that's a strong character.
And when you write your characters, do you try and leave enough open room for not describing them too much in detail? I know I try to be kind of vague as best as I can because with my characters, I mean, you wouldn't know what nationality or race any of them are because I don't think I put anything quite like that other than like hair, other than the hair length. Pretty much everything else is kind of just open for interpretation. Do you try and do that?
I did that with the Timely Death trilogy. I really kind of focused on especially since they have 2 different identities, which can be confusing to explain, but in the book, they look completely different as a shade and as a human being. So how do you go from just describing their hair color changing? I think a lot of people thought, oh, his hair turned black. Why wouldn't I recognize him? So I had to add sentences like his face changed too. But I did try to leave that more open-ended, mainly because I wanted a ghost effect. I wanted there to be like a loss of identity effect. But in Take Me Tomorrow, I think I got a little more detailed oriented, but mainly because the rest of the trilogy, that matters. but I can't really say why. So I think it depends on the book for me, but most of the time I do try to leave their descriptions a little bit more open-ended.
Okay. Trying to think of your newest book with the new publishing house. It's through Clean Teen Publishing, right?
Yes,
And it's coming out in July.
July. Yes, July 28th.
Nice. And then the next two in that series, I mean, they're basically done, or are you actually going through the editing steps for those as well?
We're doing editing for all three of them, and as of right now, Minutes Before Sunset comes out in July, Seconds Before Sunrise comes out in August, and Death Before Daylight comes out in September.
Nice. So like one every month, somebody can look
Yes.
forward to it.
So the
Right.
idea is that we're going to release them back to back.
Nice. And are you going to try and do like a whole box set type thing at one point?
I'm sure that's something we'll discuss, but we're not there yet.
Not quite yet. And then are you trying to get your other series in there?
Oh yes, that's in the plan. It's just it's in the plan. It's in the plan.
You put a pin in that one, right?
Yeah. Like a to-do list, the other books.
Great. Well, I'm trying to see if there's anybody that listed a question for you, but I don't. Either I'm not seeing it, or they haven't asked it. I'm not quite sure. But other than that, I want to just thank you for agreeing to do this with me.
Yeah, thanks for talking with me.
Yeah, I'm hoping that maybe when your next book starts getting ready, maybe I can get you back on here.
That'd be great. I would really enjoy that.
I'm sure I'll get any kinks ironed out by then. I have a few more authors lined up, so I'll get through all those stumbling blocks before our next one.
Oh, I'll get through mine too. I'm awful with that technology. I'll figure it out though.
One day we'll all be on the same page, right?
Right.
Okay, well, for anybody that's tuning in that doesn't know, you can go to Shannon's blog at www.shannonathompson.com, correct?
Yes. Yes, correct.
All right, and go pick up the book or get ready to pre-order the book, whatever you can do. Go out to Amazon and find her. And other than that, I hope everybody out there has a great weekend. Thanks, Shannon.
Thank you.